Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Femme Portfolio podcast. I'm your co-host, Bryn Bradshaw Mack.
And I'm Rachel Hirsch. And today we have the honor of having my good friend Melissa on. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Melissa, but Melissa has the coolest background. She was the CMO of pretty much every important CPG company you've ever encountered. She was really early on at Amazon Fashion. She was really early on at J.Crew. She was the CMO of Berries. She was the head of marketing at Lyft. And then she started this amazing fitness brand called Regen, which we need to hash through like a million times over. Melissa, did I miss anything?
No, it sounds great on paper. I'd love to meet this person. That's terrific. Let's keep going.
You are just, he's up. This is like sort of a generic word, but like a real badass. I was describing her to a friend earlier and I was like, how, like, she comes off as this, like, no, but I'm no big deal, but like, you're an important woman.
Can you just talk to my teenage girls and tell them that? That would be great. Let's do that. 14 and 16.
Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense. That's definitely the age of finding your own.
Yeah. Though I will say, not that you asked, but they're bosses. They really are. They are like unapologetically who they are.
That's so
And
awesome.
sometimes that's really hard to parent. But when I'm stepped away from it, I'm really impressed by these young women. I was not like this when I was 16 years old.
Reframe that a little bit? Like, you created them, you raised them. So clearly you may not have felt like that as a young girl, but you did something to make them feel like they're built this way.
Yeah, I used to take a lot of credit for my kids, which meant like, a lot of credit for the good things and a lot of self-flagellation about the not great things. And they're so different. My girls are so different. One is like math and science and good grades, and the other one is creative and compassionate and not that into grades. And so,
I love that.
we're just like here to make sure they don't fall off a cliff and that, they get to wherever they need to go. I'm not sure I can take credit for all of it, any of
I
it.
love that. I think it speaks to, it sounds like you welcome a ton of self-expression and finding your own and allowing them to be the way they want to be, which is awesome because I think that's easier said than done in the name of parenting and control and all of that. How has like motherhood shaped your career? Because it seems like a very demanding career, and to have young kids through that, I can only imagine.
I have to bring this up. I was thinking about this the other day. So it's different, right? So when I gave birth to my first daughter, I was 29, whatever. You'd think I should be able to do that math, or 30 years old. I was young in my career. I think I took a conference call like from the room, like 24 hours after she was born. And
did you have like a maternity leave policy, or was there?
Oh no, I'm the problem. It's me. It was like we definitely.
That's the name of the episode. I'm the problem. It's me.
Like I'm sure we had a maternity policy. For me, it was. I mean, if I'm being honest, a lot of it was this need to be engaged and almost like a fear of not. Right? Let me show you what a badass I am by showing up on a call right after I had my kid. And I think that's really interesting because a lot of it was like, oh, I have kids, but don't worry about that because I'm present. I'm here. I'm all about my job. And I thought that for a really long time. And I mean, when I worked at Berries, I was living in LA 2 weeks a month. And I had a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old, or a 6 and an 8-year-old at the time. Yeah, they were here with my husband. And I am married to that rare, maybe I think he's rare, kind of guy whose expectation is that we parent equally. It never like occurred to him that I would do more. I mean, he signed up for me, God bless. But it's always like that. And so, he knew that my career was important to me and I wanted this job, and I took this job in Los Angeles, and he stepped up and stepped in, and he actually took on the majority of the parenting at that time.
Tell us how you got this job, like how it came to be, because it's, from my perspective, one of the coolest jobs that could have ever been. And like, this was at the height. This was when you were like, you built it into what it is, what we know it today.
So what I would say about berries is it actually was one of the most incredible work experiences of my life, in no small part to the leadership that I got to work with. And so the thing about being a marketing person, CMO, whatever that really means, is in my mind, my job is to sort of be a CEO whisperer, right? There are these founders and CEOs, and they have incredible vision and usually also not enough hours in the day. And so my job is to listen to what they can articulate or the things that they know in their soul that they are not yet able to articulate and figure out what can that look like to consumers. How can we take that goodness and build a business and a brand with it? And Joey Gonzalez, who's the CEO of Berries, is one of the most brilliant brand people I know and community builders. And he also understands actually how brand, product, business, community, they're not like four different bullet points on a deck. They're all part of the same thing, which is how can I build something that is meaningful to humans? Because the thing about community is if you think about it just as a marketing tactic, then people will feel it as a marketing tactic. But if you weave it into the core of your product, then it's authentic and then it works. How does he do that? How did I do that? So first I started on the Barry's board of directors, and which is an unusual and not always easy way to come into a company actually. And so a friend of mine that I'd known forever introduced me to the guys at North Castle, which is an incredible private equity firm because they invest in their businesses in so many more ways than financial. And it's incredible. I swear they haven't paid me to say this. I just really believe it.
I loved, we were talking on a recent episode about like the impact driven element of bringing more finances to the wellness brands and particularly to female founded wellness brands. And I think that disconnect is frequently what's missed is like, we'll give you the money, but we don't necessarily, you could take dollars from anyone. It's like, we want the dollars from someone who's aligned with the vision and like who cares to buy into the brand and to the direction of the company. So that is an incredible endorsement for that firm.
Amazing. And they were very much in the trenches with us, building and us with them. And it was a partnership. They were part of the organization, which doesn't mean it felt any better to be on the other side of the boardroom when I became an operator and they were like grilling me with questions. And every once in a while, I have to break character and be like, seriously? Okay, I got it. But I was on the board and they had no marketing team of which to speak, right? They had an incredible woman in there who I think her prior job is she was Julia Elizabeth's first assistant at SoulCycle, which by the way, talk about community. Right.
Yeah.
And she had come up through the ranks at Soul. I feel like she had managed a studio, which is an incredibly important job for anyone who actually is in marketing because she's been on the front lines with the customers, she's managed instructors, she's done the whole thing. And it's a great job, really, and a hard one. It's sort of like, being governor, but like on a micro scale. And what's interesting is, so she was really the only person there. And then there was some freelance teams, some community, but I walked into the board as a marketing expert. And they were like, well, what if you were to come in-house? And I'm like, you live in Los Angeles, so it's a really long commute, because I live in New York. And the agreement is I would start as a consultant. Hot take. I'm a terrible consultant. I really like to come in and build and grow and work. And for me to tell me I can't do those things doesn't really work. So I will now never get a consulting job because of this, but it's fine because that's what I do. I like to build with people. And I remember my first night at Barry's, I flew into Los Angeles and I had done some pre-work, right? So I had read through the whole website, et cetera. And I sat down at Joey's beautiful home and his incredible dining room table. And I said, I was like, I've read through the website. I have some thoughts. And that's actually how it all started, which is, I get strangely emotional about this. We started to read through the website together and talk about language and talk about the brand and make sure there were no typos. And he has such a clear sense of the brand. He is the brand. He is it, you know? Um, and, you know, he has this incredible business, which is sexy and can be intimidating, but is also incredibly warm and kind at the same time. And he is a mission driven human and all of these things, and also is in the best shape of anyone I've ever met in my life. So I was like, I'm going to really need to work out more if I can keep this job. But that's, he lives this, you know, and he's a people collector. So you can meet him once at a class like 20 years ago, and he like somehow will remember you. And then everyone texts him. People just call, he's so accessible that he's like, yeah, I just got a text from this guy with class, New York, Chelsea, 1999, you know, and like he thinks X and he reads and responds to all of his texts. And while this may not sound like it's about berries, it's actually everything you need to know about berries, because community is not what we did, it's who we were. It's who they are. And it certainly comes from the top.
Powerful. I think that also really speaks to, as Berries has scaled so successfully, that feeling still remains. I go to Berries like weekly all throughout New York City, and it always is that same sense of comfort. And even the instructor base that they cultivate and train, there's a real identity to it. And so to be able to have that effect at the scale with which they're doing so is so impressive and clearly speaks to it being like a true foundational pillar, not something that they're trying to force into the brand. That's
How
incredible.
did that scale? Because I think if the brand is Joey and if it comes from the top, I appreciate that, but they have scaled massively. And how do you keep that, like, respond to every text as you build to 10 plus, 20 plus, however many studios?
I think it has to do with hiring people with a shared sense of values and who really believe in the mission. Like, honestly, I think the biggest difference, what I've seen from starting as an individual contributor and becoming a manager later in my career, is it's all about who you hire. Like, it's great if you're amazing at doing your job, right? Executing and copy or whatever your superpower is, you know, meta, etc. But you get to a point in your career where it's not about you executing everything. It's find the people who believe, find the people that want to be in the trenches with you, find the people who like know in their gut what is the right and wrong thing to do. And you'll be, you know, you're in good hands. So in terms of like actual tactics of what we did, we're all customers, right? Or clients. We all know. And so when I walk into a fitness studio, when I walk into my local studio in Westchester is Scarsdale, right? And in New York, I used to go to Chelsea, etc. I don't care if they opened a studio in Sydney or if they hit their EBITDA goals, or I don't care. What I want them to know is like, hey, Melissa, we reserved double floor for you because we know you're double floor. And how was your vacation last week? And are your girls still this? Like, I need them to know me. Yeah. I want it. And so the trick is like, how do you build a personal, localized brand on a global scale? How do you do it one person, one treadmill, one set of weights at a time? And the answer is number one, tech is your friend. So if we worked with, we were the first fitness company that worked with Mariana Tech, and we got to pilot that with them. So, you know, kudos and shout out. Thank you to Stacey Selden and Shannon Tracy for their patience with us, because we were like, we want this and we want that. And all of it really was about, we want functionality to better serve our clients. So it looks like things like flagging on the back end. And I know everyone's doing this now, which is like, this is this person's birthday. This is this person's first class. This person was referred by other person. This person has a neck issue. This person like, doesn't like to be spoken to, whatever it is. Like, it's about being able to keep those notes. And then the way that's delivered is great fitness businesses are hospitality businesses. So we actually had
So real.
hospitality.
That's so real. I don't think I've ever thought of it as like that clear, but that's accurate, 100%.
Yeah, it's hospitality. So we rolled out hospitality training, and there was a whole big book, which sounds very analog.
Homework.
And it's all about, yeah, and it was super important to the brand, but how do you address people? What are words we use? What are words we don't use? So I had a whole team of Soul Cycle people, and I really believe that they are best in class, or when they began, were best in class in community and hospitality. Those are the same, by the way. And so, and it's Soul Cycle, they have all these things like you're not allowed to use the word free because it denigrates the brand. We don't say discount. So I came from fashion, from luxury. And so I was told this, and I'm like, I love that. Let's make a list of words we don't use. And a lot of that also, by the way, is it's hospitality training, but it's also brand. Because the language you use in your advertising is one thing. What really stays in your head is the language that you hear when you go into the four-wall environment. You know, does someone greet you by name? How do they speak? Do they pay attention to you? Are they kind? You know, not to fast forward to my recent business, but I launched this fitness method for women's longevity, and I focused on midlife. And one of the things I heard from people all the time in the studio, because I worked the desk, because that's the kind of person I am, was I love that this is a no bitches allowed place.
That's awesome. That's so awesome. How do you think you made that clear?
Because I do think that a couple things matter. First of all, the fact that I am not 25 even helped, because the people who appreciated it the most were women who were, let's just call it like 38 plus. And not everyone in our studio had women who were like in their 20s, 50s, 60s. And I swear, I think I had a 75-year-old woman who would come in there. My instructors will tell you who she was and that she was a badass. And so wherever you went in my studio, someone else looked like you, right? You could find yourself in another woman who was your age or your size or your, like, whatever you were. It just, there was not the uniformity of many other studios.
Can we dig into that a little bit? Like,
Sure.
why do you think that is? Because where I spend a lot of my time is yoga and even at Pilates. And the Pilates that I go to in particular is different than some of the more sexy ones, maybe. And so I do see a broad spectrum of age and demographic. And it's like fun because it's like it feels like longevity to me. It feels like community in different ways, especially because I'm in a city where I don't have family. And so it's sort of like, you know, there's different ways that it feels familial. But why is that missing in so much of fitness in general?
A couple things. First of all, I think yoga does this very well, to your point. Like, so it really does. And part of it also is the physical practice of yoga lends itself to that in most places. And actually in the places where it doesn't, then you see this like, you know, worshiping at the altar of youth. And what I see happening right now across fitness actually is this, is such an emphasis on what things look like and not enough conversation on what they feel like. What's really interesting is, so I started a business called Regen, and it was all born out of my insane health past where I had been like misdiagnosed with cancer, and a doctor told me, don't worry, it's nothing. It's in your head. Women get like this. And yeah, he was amazing. And took me a year to get diagnosed. And actually, it bears sort of repeating the story. And I was ultimately treated by an oncologist, also a man, by the way. It's not gendered, right? Like, anyone can be a jerk. When I said to him, like, Dr. Gotino, I love you. I'm so glad that I'm like clean bill of health right now, but what can I do to never see you again? He said, diet and exercise. And he handed me a copy of a book, which is his approach to nutrition that I live by. And he said, get yourself a membership at the Y. So, and I got really, it was amazing. He's very like that. And what's incredible about that is I got really into this idea of wellness before it had a capital W, and longevity before I even knew what the hell that meant. And the interesting thing is, and everyone's talking about it right now, which is amazing, is that my experience as a woman has continually been about being undermined by various health professionals. I went in once, I was told I had SIBO, but instead I really needed to have my fallopian tubes removed. I went in, another time, and actually this is where to get up to speed on the business, I had all these issues in my early 40s, like this. Like, I'm walking around with my phone in my hand and I'm like, where's my phone? Where's my phone? And I couldn't sleep. I was sleeping about 4 hours a night. And I know I was not that much fun to be with.
I was going to say, isn't that so frustrating too, when you know what keeps you sane and it becomes the domino effect of not only you're not sleeping, but now you're stressed because it's good to be sleeping and restorative to be sleeping. And
oh my God,
that can make you spiral.
And yes. And what's so interesting though, is that conversation. So this was 5 years ago now that this started. And there was not a dialogue about perimenopause out there at all. So yeah. I thought I had Alzheimer's. Actually, I'm also a bit of a hypochondriac, but actually I thought I was I'm losing my mind. And I called my doctor and I was like, these are all the things that are going on with me. And she said, it's stress, but it wasn't. I was in the throes of perimenopause, and
that's so real. You're not alone in that. That is one of the things that I have uncovered in the past 18 months is the lack of education that doctors get about women's health. So they're doing the best they can, but it's
That's
not
right.
They really learn in school. Even your OBG, she may have no education on hormone health, on menopause, on women's specific issues, which is crazy to think about. You think you're going to your OBG however often and getting your pap smear and you're all good to go. And the reality is she needs or he needs resources about these things so that they can actually be more educated resources for you. And thank goodness for technology. Again, technology is our friend, because I do think that with the support of technology and some AI and some data sets about women that are actually coming to be, that they will be able to on the back end, you'll be able to put in these are my symptoms, and it'll auto populate instead of what used to be just stress because there's no data on women, it will now say oh, it makes sense. You're probably in perimenopause. These are the symptoms. These are some things you can read. These are some things you can do. But it wasn't until very recently that there were data sets on women's vaginal health. So think about it. It's you can get men's sperm in a variety, it's not that challenging, but women's, to get our inside data, you have to insert something. And so it's actually really hard, and the frequency in which you would have to insert something to capture that data, it's just not quite as easy, but it had never been done until recently.
Yeah.
Of course now.
No, so there was
you go ahead.
Well, I was going to say what's really interesting. So is everything you said is exactly the heart of the problem, which is it's the gender care gap is an output of one bias and two, the gender data gap. And the gender data gap is really, and I'm saying what we've all heard now many times, is that's the heart of the problem. I can't remember the exact dates, but because there was a conversation, I think it was the late 60s, early 70s, that women, by nature of their hormonal fluctuations, would throw off the data in any sort of research, that they were excluded. By the way, it wasn't until the 90s.
Until I was alive that things changed.
That's insane.
Yeah. So I think it was 1993 was a legislation that required them, but it was actually more that was de jure, not necessarily de facto, and it happened over time. And so today, by the way, not all medical
And
schools.
we're not separated. Like the way in
Yeah.
which we respond to things obviously is going to be different. Like if we just critically thought about it for a minute, you'd get to that response. And we're still, it's like humans, one response.
I
Yeah.
think even zooming out further, something you said along the way that I find very fascinating is like the transition of Eastern, Western, and that mix. And like to have a doctor actually say, like, go join the Y and follow this diet, like, there's not
It's
enough
the
of that
best.
either. Now let's actually learn about like holistic health and what this looks like. And it's not just fad experiences and high, cost classes and all of these supplements. It's like, let's dig a little deeper and having doctors care to really
Yes.
embrace that is like so refreshing.
Exactly. Totally. And it's interesting because just to take us more off topic, because I just really like to go down this swirling around and the whole
So fun.
thing. It's like, the placemats for kids at the diner, and you have to like find your way out of the maze. Sometimes I feel like that's me having a conversation. I built this studio. The whole idea for my business was because the other thing that happens is as you age, first of all, we all go into perimenopause, like some of us as early as our late 30s. So there's that. And as the level of estrogen in your body declines, the risk of injury during exercise increases. I got hurt because I was like, lifting too much. I'm really into strength training. I always have been, and I
Ooh,
got hurt. Yeah,
can I
and
have
it was
you?
not cute.
I was gonna say after, can I have you share on why you're into strength training? Because I
Yeah,
think
I'm
that's
happy
another
to.
thing. Please.
I have a lot to say about
I'll
that.
pin it, but I'm gonna
Um,
come back and ask you some questions on that.
and when I got hurt working out, I went to a couple doctors or whatever, and they said, you really should do something that's like a little bit better for your body or that's more suitable to a woman as she's aging. And I was like, so what am I supposed to do? And they said, well, what did they call therapeutic Pilates? And I was like, are you kidding? Like, first of all, I'm
Ancient.
45. Second of all, like, no way. The lighting is bad. The music is terrible. It's like not the community I want to be a part of. Also, let's go back to the bad lighting for a second. And like, I like to move my body. I like loud music. I also really care. I don't know why it's a bad word, but like I care about what my physique looks like. And
Not a bad.
so I'm like, when people are like, it's weird. You like have to say like, we can help you make you confident now. I'm like, I am super confident. I also just like want to be
Hard
rich.
workout classes.
Like, I'm good. That's for me to take up with a different kind of professional. So I asked, like, well, are there any workouts created for women at the studio level? And the answer was no. And I'm like, that is so dumb. So I started as a publicist in my 20s, which means I'm a really good stalker. I dated in New York in my 20s, which also makes you a good stalker. So I tracked down the the woman who runs exercise sciences, the master's program at Columbia, and also a guy who does weight loss and exercise sciences at Yale. And I enlisted them and some amazing fitness professionals to create this fitness method that is specifically optimized for women as they age. No, it's also amazing for anyone. It's amazing for men too, however you identify. But the idea was it was half Pilates and half strength training, heavy weights. And for me, the most fun was that we created a women's brand and it was sexy and it was cool. And it had a name that didn't sound like Vagisil, which is like everything that's created for women. I'm like, why is it like pink and purple and Vagisil-ish? And the whole idea was a workout that felt good for your body and just acknowledging that human interaction and social interaction in person is a measurable input to health span and lifespan. So when we went to go raise money, which I was really not good at, by the way, also you put that on a list of the things I had no idea what I was doing. I'd been an operator forever. I was like, I'm like Googling under the table what people are saying as they're talking. Like I'm raising on a safe. I just don't know what it stands for. And people were like, why aren't you doing a digital concept? I said, because the four walls are part of the practice.
Also, it's so true because most of the workout classes I go to have some online presence, and like the demographic in the name of inclusivity that you want to attract is someone who is really soaking up the energy of being in the room. Like I'm
I love
someone
that.
I pretty exclusively take classes. And if I don't take a class, I'm somewhat all or nothing, which is to a fault. And so doing the online recordings, like that is, it just does not have the same effect, even if it's so totally on brand to the in studio experience. Like there's something to be said about soaking up that energy. And I think that probably speaks to when you're like, I want this type of intensity. I don't want this lighting. I don't want this music. You want to feel, you
Totally.
want to look around and see people who are putting in the effort that you're trying to put in
Motivating.
yourself.
100%.
Hold you
So I
accountable. It's motivating.
I mean, I think it's interesting. We could completely go on a tangent on like the COVID era and having to work out from home and like the, resurrection of these studios. But I think at the end of the day, so grateful that it's all back. And I just think there's nothing to be replaced from like being in there and
100%.
feeling the experience.
Can I ask a pointed question and you can say skip? Why doesn't regen exist anymore? Like what were the biggest learnings and how can we resurrect it?
Okay. Rachel, my favorite conversation with you is the resurrection of regen, which also sounds like an epic film with Mel Gibson. And okay, so what was wrong with regen? It was I think the right idea. It may have been a little too early for the idea, but the primary mistake was because we didn't raise enough money. And I was like, I can bootstrap this. I'm an operator. We don't need that much money. That was mistake number one. We should have raised more. We were always optimizing for revenue when we should have been optimizing for learning and proof of concept. And when because we were focused on making sure there were dollars in, we didn't always serve the consumer in the way that I wish we had served the consumer, right? And so I think that's true in any business, by the way. Like when you lead with a dollar, you get a dollar. When you lead with service and how can I really help the customer, they're a customer for life.
How did you feel like that showed up in practice? Like, where do you feel like there was
Yeah. So a couple things. The first is our pricing. The second was which sounds a little crazy, we didn't comp enough. We should have, and what I mean by that is we needed to create more opportunity for trial. So one of the things I didn't consider is we did this workout. It was delicious, by the way. It was half Pilates, half strength training, and it went really fast.
Sounds amazing.
Because it was 25 minutes on one, and then I don't know about you, but like I work out and I'm still like, I'm counting the minutes backwards after 5 minutes.
So relatable as well.
This is so true. I'm like, oh. So the thing that's really interesting about a workout that's half Pilates and half heavy strength training is most people who have done one don't do the other. And so everyone was a newbie. Everyone was not just new to regen, but new to at least half of that class.
Wow.
So I didn't really think about that before we launched. And it's a customer that felt a lot more comfortable with, our client who felt a lot more comfortable with a lightweight, have a lot of reps, which is great. It's just not what we were focused on. And to make it worse, it was also reformer Pilates, which is also great and can be very intimidating to people. Of course, the thing is reformer Pilates is actually easier than mat Pilates because it keeps you in the position versus just you and your core and a dream. But
it's interesting you say this because for being a brand built on longevity and like spanning a wider market, both of those two workouts are incredibly intimidating. And it's not necessarily that they're meant to be, but like I think what's interesting with reformer Pilates specifically, and I'm speaking mainly to the New York City experience, is there's been such intense cult dynamics for some of these studios that like
Yes.
even as someone who works out all the time and feels very comfortable, I'm still super intimidated to show up in a new class. I'm like, it just feels like everyone's been doing this a lot longer and like it's not quite a rinse and repeat to some of the others. So I think that's probably where there was some like friction as well, as like those are intimidating. They're
100%.
separately intimidating and then put them together. And I'm sure it's extra intimidating until you go and get used to it. But
100%.
Do you feel like you've learned enough to do it again successfully, or it
Oh
was
my God. I hate when we do this kind of conversation.
I want you to do it again. I'm like, that's my
so many.
So here's what, okay. So here's what I would do differently. Which is a couple things. I think there's a lot happening in the boutique fitness space, and maybe the world doesn't need another luxury boutique fitness studio. What I think boutique fitness has meant is that it's a high quality workout delivered in a branded environment that has an emphasis on community and connection, as well as the physicality of the experience. Full stop. And I think that can happen in a strip mall without equipment for like half the price. You know, I really do. It's, if I had to do regen over again, I hope my trainers are not listening to this because they would like kill me for this. So hi, sorry guys. I think it would be really interesting to do strength training and yoga actually, instead of strength training and Pilates. I'm not just saying this for you, Rachel Hirsch. I think it would be really, and you just do mat yoga, and you can do whatever you want to do, even if you do like an Ashtanga practice or something, and then you do heavier weights, right? But you meet people where they are, right? Heavy for you today could be 3 pounds. That's cool. I'm fine.
Well, that's the other logistical piece with reformer is it's truly limiting because you need the equipment and the equipment needs to be spaced out. And those classes, like you have to charge what you need to like for it
That's
to be
exactly
worth it.
right.
And that's the challenge too.
Exactly right.
You can't pack people in the room the way you can with a sculpt or a yoga meets strength.
Right. That's exactly right.
Can I push back only because Melissa knows me well enough that I feel like I can play devil's advocate with her. Okay, so empowered is so many of the beautiful things of what you're saying, but we are arguably, and I hope this isn't a bad way to say it, but we are arguably like a strip mall version because we're not this luxury environment. It's like you walk in and you can tell it's a labor of love. There's loads of plants. Some are blossoming. Some need some love. Like it's just this. I mean, our community. It is our community that brings us an extra plant one day or whatever it is. Like it is a vibrant community, and that we've gotten right. But I do think that especially like with the economy more broadly, that people do like this achievable luxury because it is really out of reach, at least for me, to travel to Europe. Like it used to be, maybe within reach, or it's really challenging to go on vacation or to buy a car or whatever it is. So the little things, and that's why I think like a company like Fishwife, where it's like luxury in a tin, or I think fitness can be luxury like one class at a time. I do think there's value in that. And I know it sounds like silly and it's not necessary and there is a way to do it on the cheap, but I wonder if there's value in the happiness and the satisfaction that provides.
I'd say that all of that is yes and. Luxury is just like a really interesting word, by the way, to dig onto itself. But I'm going to digress, Bryn, so save me and you say.
No, I wasn't. I was just going to say, I think that it is such a yes and because I think that's true. I mean, LA is the same way. I think the problem is the saturation. You can literally, I'm like
100%.
a ClassPass user. I tried a new yoga studio this morning. Like I am always on a great migration to just like bop in because I'm doing it based on my insane busyness. And so I think that's the problem. Like even paying that price tag, it's like, can you get the price tag to where it's worth having the studio open, but then keep the people coming to just you when literally 2 doors down is another variation. And like, to Melissa, your point with I relate to on like the time does not go quick enough in these classes. Sometimes I just need to change it up because I'm like, I don't actually remember what happens in this one. And like that alone will help me make this a little bit easier. So I think finding that balance of like, you want the gourmet experience, you want it to be sustainable, you want it to be varying in class offering enough that someone says, I'm pretty much exclusively coming to you, or it's you and one other variation. And I think that sweet spot is just really hard to land.
Double tap into that. I know we've gone so rogue from any of the questions that we talked about, but
I
class
love this. Let's keep going.
I do too.
pass and owning someone's fitness in totality, like their fitness experience, I think is such an interesting dynamic, because I think what a lot of people don't know is that the studio is losing every time someone uses ClassPass.
That's right.
It is.
I know.
I used to have a really like stand on my high horse with it and be like, well, like I'll do whatever it takes. I'll give you a class for $10 as long as like you'll switch over from ClassPass, because we're still with $10 we'd still be making more than we do from ClassPass. But it's, how do you be everything? Because, sorry, it is hard to, as a yoga studio or as a Pilates studio, to be variant enough that one person wants to come to you 3, 4, 5, 6 days a week. So is it important that you have 2 rooms and have 2 variety? Is it like a half class? How do you offer more to people to get them away from ClassPass? Or is it studios working with nearby studios, creating their own version of ClassPass? Like, there's got to be a better way.
Yeah. I'm curious, actually, I'm going to ask you a question, which is, in your studio, is the demographic of people who use ClassPass or request ClassPass, is it different than those who come on a direct relationship with you?
So no, I can tell you exactly who the ClassPass user is, but we do have members that also fit that profile. One of my problems is that because ClassPass, you can get discounts on it. It doesn't matter how many credits or how much you get from it. It's often just going to be cheaper. And they talk about like, there's no cannibalization. We have seen members hop off and join ClassPass. And I don't blame them. Like, I'm not blaming the consumer. I'm blaming ClassPass, because they're literally eating away at a community center at the end of the day. And we're trying to provide, especially in a post-COVID world where everyone is so lonely, every single class, people introduce themselves to one another and like they go to brunch after or whatever it is. And this tech company is making so much money off of these little mom and pop studios who can't even keep the lights on. It's just, there's got to be a better way. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think that whoever can disintermediate ClassPass wins. So when I looked at the business, so you asked me like things that I could have done differently. We took our eye off the ball, and we had been very much focused on this midlife women. And then we sort of said, all right, well, there are other people coming, there are younger women coming, there are guys coming. Let's like soft shoe the message. And when I ultimately hindsighted the business, the women who were like, let's just call it like millennial Gen X, right? Like, were such better quality clients by a lot. They didn't ask for ClassPass discounts all the time. They weren't interested in promotions. They didn't just sit and film themselves in class, and it was, they were interested in community over content. And then there was a younger group that was content over community. I saw it. And actually, the other interesting thing about that demographic, let's just call it like the millennial Gen Xers, is it was all about referral, especially as you got older. It's word of mouth. And so, Nicole, who was on the Parents Association of the Lycée, would bring in her friend Lauren, and Lauren it wasn't as quick. It's not like an influencer posts about you and you get like 500 people who come once. Instead, you get 5 people who become loyalists. And it's just you really feel the difference in the generations for sure, because they come together. They refer their friends. They have their time. Oh, we come on Mondays at 9:30 and Thursdays at this. Like, it's just, and I thought that was so interesting, and so it takes longer to scale a business like that when it's just one person at a time, but you wind up with a higher LTV client. Going back to the original piece of this, of like, why would this work in a strip mall, or what does that mean? I think that in general, whether you're talking about boutique fitness or eggs, right? Things are really expensive right now. And the thing about fitness is I think it's become prohibitively expensive, right? In the boutique category, because I don't want to go once a week. That's the thing. The thing that's great about boutique fitness is I want to go all the time if it works, right? That's the whole idea, is it's addictive by nature of the workout and the environment and the community. But if it costs too much for it to be my everyday thing, then the magic of boutique fitness is a bit lost, because it's a personal relationship. And so what I see happening right now in fitness is really interesting. It's a little bit like what happened in fashion when I was at J.Crew, which is like you see, I think it's like the Planet Fitnesses, et cetera, of the world are doing really well. And then you have this very hyper luxury longevity clinic phenomenon, and they're like $40,000 a year, you know? So I guess my question though is what is going to happen to the middle? What is
What
going to
happened?
happen in
Yeah.
boutique?
What happened to the middle in fashion?
It fell out. I mean, J. Crew went bankrupt, Gap went bankrupt. They all fell out. And people were like, I can get what I need at Zara or Shein, and then people who really valued quality would do sort of, fewer better. So one thing from a designer brand or something like that. But fashion's interesting, right? Like it's come back. J. Crew now looks amazing. And it's still like amazing. And they've managed to strike this balance between accessible and inspirational, which they had done very well years ago. And it's affordable to many. So Gap actually looks great and has
Yeah.
so I think hopefully things will sort itself out in the fitness business so that people can afford to be a member of the community that is meaningful to them.
Yes, I totally agree. I do want you to plug the importance of strength training because I think that there's
Oh,
a
yeah.
complete disconnect in the female community. And I'm constantly trying to tell my friends, get into strength training. It is so empowering.
Okay. So I could talk about strength training for a long time. In fact, I
I
could
love
like
this.
start a business on it. So I was like in the cult of cardio for a long time. I did all of that. I'm old enough to have taken every single class that has ever been of relevance. So I did step classes, I did kickboxing classes, I did spin classes. Like I was at the first anyway, I've done all the classes and horrible at staff for whatever it's worth. Play tennis. I used to run before I hurt myself. And I have to be honest, like cardio was great for my heart. It never actually did anything for my body. It made me starving and I out ate my losses. My cardio food P&L was not working for me. So, but it was very good for my health. And I never seen women really strength train. Actually, sorry, I also did bar classes. There was an original bar class in New York called Lottie Burke, which I took in
Gosh,
high school, which was literally I think she was a German dancer.
I could
I
only
did this
imagine
and
that class.
it was incredible. It was incredible. It was like great bodies and a lot of Birkin bags. And
Epic. That is so good.
they were not my
I mean,
bags, bodies and
yeah.
Birkin bags, a love story. So I never seen a woman lift a heavy weight until I got to Barry's. And I looked around the room and there were these women who were lean and live and strong, and they were lifting like the same amount of weight or similar to the guys. And I'm super competitive. So I'm like, me too. I'm going to do this. And the thing about strength training is, and I heard this in my studio all the time, it's empowering.
Totally.
It feels really good. You're like, I'm strong. I feel strong. And I actually only did double floor at Barry's, so I didn't run at all. And I took class a lot. My body was super lean. I was super strong. The whole thing about bulking up is a myth. It does the
Again,
opposite.
everyone needs to hear that. Run that back, please.
I mean, I was the leanest I have ever been, and I was in great shape. Like I was not someone who did cardio and yet was able to do a tough mudder, just because I was so strong. And also, because if you tell me I can't do something, I will do it.
I also love
Uh,
about strength training that it's very meditative because when you're saying like it's so intense and it's so competitive in a productive sense, when I've been in class, like you're actually focusing. These are not easy moves. And when you're adding that amount of weight, like there's not too much room for error. Whereas I feel like in some other forms of exercise, you can get really lost in your mind because you're kind of going through the motions. I find strength training to be so therapeutic and so like present building.
Yes, I agree with all of that. And also, interestingly, there is a whole community element in strength training too, right? And there's like we had this conversation at Regen. There's a lot of community that's built in the middle of a class. So classes that have natural breaks, ours did, Barry's does. There's a whole thing that happens in the middle when you're like switching
Totally.
places or like, do you want the 20s? No, I'll get the 30s. No, I'm going to get the fives. And there's a whole strange, interesting dialogue that happens over a weight rack because, because it does, because if one woman sees another one do something, then you feel like maybe I could do that too. But yeah, I think, and actually, I'll tell you, like I did an in-body scan this summer because I went to work. Actually, a woman who was an early instructor at Flywheel started a business called Lifted, a fitness studio, and it's Holly Rollinger's studio, and it's all about midlife women in strength training. And she has women in there lifting a lot of weight, a lot, heavy weights. And I took class there this summer after we had closed operations at Regen. And I did this in-body scan, and my fitness level was close to whatever the scan is, like an athlete's fitness level. And I'm like, that was no one more surprised than I. And it's just because I strength train and have for years. Can I plug one other thing though while we're talking
Yes.
about this?
Yes.
When I'm excited about strength training, I do it and I do it frequently. And when I'm not, I need to listen to my body and not. And
That is
that
so important.
actually is something I've been hearing a lot of lately. And you said it a bit of it earlier, which is like, we have to strength train and we have to have 5,000 grams of protein every day and we have to sleep 8 hours and we have to do this. And like, that is great. And that is the ideal, but I don't live an ideal life all the time. And after this summer, I was really tired. I like had to go through a grieving process for my business and I just was emotionally exhausted. And I didn't want to lift weights. I just didn't. I wanted to like take a yoga class and spin and, like unearth my Peloton and like have a moment with like the Rent soundtrack and like a spin class. And I just needed to not judge that, like,
Totally.
and
That is so
I
real.
think, like I feel like we keep doing this to people where it's like, if you're not doing this, then you're going to die at 3 this afternoon,
Yeah,
and it's fear mongering. And
totally.
it's not okay because we have to learn to listen to ourselves and to trust our own bodies. And we talked a little bit earlier about the trend that's happening right now with wellness. And I actually think there's something really interesting where we're almost going too far, right? And
Could
there's
not agree
a
more.
anti-science thing or fostering distrust in science and medical doctors, which does, in my opinion, is not right and it's not safe and it's really dangerous. And so I appreciate the like trinity of humans that we all listen to because they own the longevity conversation. And my doctor's really smart too. The NIH also does really good research. Yeah, I'm really just conscious of the space that the wellness business is in right now, the wellness industry, and the increasing commercialization, commodification of wellness and what that
This is
means to
so
the
real.
integrity of the message.
Even like stylized rest. Like I feel like we talked about this on an earlier episode, but the imposter syndrome in so many facets of life, whether it's work, whether it's being a woman in a very male dominated space. I was even when you're talking about like wanting to pick up the phone, a day after giving birth, I was like, is that a self-inflicted feeling? Was that like a pressure in the room? And I'm going to come back to that in a moment. But what I was going to say is I feel like we've even like stylized balance and like taking the rest days. And so some of these people that we look up to in the wellness space or just happen to get a lot of traction in the wellness space, it's like can we really get the truth on like what is your time off look like? And can we remind people that it's not about being on 7 days a week, or like your rest day being this slow yoga class with a nice long walk and the visit to the I'm like, that's not a freaking rest day. That's a really damn good day. Like, I think that's the
Totally.
other side. So awesome, and appreciate hearing you say that, because I think you can get the addictive personality gets into something like that and then can be very resentful of, oh, I'm not feeling this week and I'm just going to force myself to show up, because no, that's not the goal. We're losing the point of wellness if that's how we're showing up.
I think that
I feel
so
that.
much of that, and this is what I struggle with, whether it's traditional healthcare or wellness, or so much of this is all of our bodies are beautifully different, like anatomically, physically different. All of our
Seasonally, yeah.
experiences mentally and physically are different. And I know I sound like a little woo woo, but I say this so often when I teach. Like, what feels good in your body is probably vastly different than your neighbor. And it's
100%.
probably vastly different than what will feel good in your body in a week from now. And it's up to us as autonomous, empowered human beings to know what we need and to tap into it. And I used to like hate going to reformer classes because they'd say like 6 yellow springs. And I was like, well, I can only do 2. And now I love going to a reformer class because he says 3 and I put on 1. And like, he'll come by and be like, is this, you should add more. I'm like, nope, this is my
I'm
body,
good.
my choice. And I have the autonomy to say, this is what feels good to me. This is what I need. My body is craving sweets, or my body is craving chicken soup. And so I am going to eat that to nourish my body, my mind. And like, until we trust ourselves more, I think like we will continue to see, whether it's dieting or fitness, like over commercialization, because it's a business at the end of the day. And we live in a capitalist society, and you have to own yourself enough to be like, that's actually going to probably injure me.
I mean, preach, sister. And what you said, for me at least, is as much true in my health and wellness as it is in my career, as it is in my relationships. I mean, that's it. Like, if I could trust myself and just not look left and not look right, but just keep the focus on myself, then my whole life would be, I'm not going to say better, but different. It would really be different. And I've been thinking about that a lot, actually, in terms of my career recently, which is not what should I do, not where should I work, not where should I be in my career, not what should I want to do, but like what's my truth right now? And as someone who is an overachiever her whole life, that's very uncomfortable. The idea of not someone once said to me this expression, it's like, what you think of me is what I think of me. Right? That I don't have any insides. It's just about what your thoughts are, right? My resume, my engagement ring, my friendships, my whatever it is, that's who I am. And now, just to go back to the conversation about my daughters, like I hope that they have less of that. But it's really hard for me, at least, to say, I'm just tired today versus beating myself up for it because of the I should, all of that stuff. I just have that's hard. That's like a one day at a time showing up and just saying, this is what I need today,
I love that. Listen, I have like,
Relatable.
we haven't tapped into Amazon or
Oh.
Shop or like so many other things away, but I feel like we save it for a second episode just because it's so deep and I'm like obsessed with this and it's full circle now. Thoughts?
I could like have this dialogue all day long. It's my favorite conversation. Yeah. And it's funny because like it is what I mean about the like resume piece, right? Where it sounds so good on paper, but I can't read my own PR, like there's the biggest difference for me when I started versus where I am today is, everyone says furloughed from their jobs, which is just pandemic speak for fired. So I was fired from my job during COVID, and they were really generous with us. And I was able to like spend a year just doing what I wanted to do. Like I got my yoga teaching training certification. So Rachel, maybe you can hire me. I'll teach at your studio. I'm a horrible, horrible yoga instructor.
You're just
Yeah.
a
No one,
different, you might just be a different profile yoga instructor in terms of the style. Maybe you're just a little more intense.
no, Bryn, I don't
I
know
don't
my
know.
right from my left. So it's
Oh, okay,
really,
got it. So it's one of that.
Everyone uses that one.
That's
but the thing that happened during COVID for me is, hi, Pumpkin. The thing that happened during COVID for me is I was like home with my kids for a year. And like, I honestly can't talk about it without crying, but like, I knew what they had going on in class and I got to help them with their homework. And I like put ponytails in their hair and I like was part of their lives. We made dinner every single night. We had family dinner and I realized like I want that. I want that. Like I don't want to have to hear third hand like what my kids did last week. And it's not mom guilt. It's not guilt. It's that that's what fills me up, you know? So that's it. And now today the question is how can I find a career where it's rigorous and I'm interested and I'm engaged and I'm doing something meaningful and I know what my kids like had for lunch yesterday and uh you know that's the goal, right? And I know you can't do everything, but my priorities have definitely shifted, you know?
It's so hard because I think about this all the time. Like,
amazing.
there's no one better to hire than a mom. Like, they're the best planners, they're the best coordinators, they're the best executors. You can trust them without fail. They will get it. Like, they're the best people to hire, best employees, full stop. And yet, it is hard for moms to be to find jobs that are conducive. And it is hard for moms when they take a year to be, present in their home to then come back to the workforce. And the question of, well, what was this year? But why are you behind? Like, well, do you know what's going on now? And there is a shift that inevitably, I can't believe it's 2025 and this hasn't happened, but that doesn't make sense. We are half the population, theoretically more than half of the workforce potentially, and huge assets. And there need to be like the Amazons of the world, the Googles, the whomever, they need to be aware of this demographic that they're missing out on. These could be key employees that they just need to sort of rejigger what they anticipated the workforce needs to look like, or what a job or timeline or whatever status quo is, because it doesn't make sense for everyone.
Yeah. I've been interviewing for jobs and 4 days ago, my whole day was planned perfectly, right? I had the interview at 5 and I was going to pick up my younger daughter, Eleanor, right before then at basketball practice. I am killing life today. You ever like, it's all working. And I get to Eleanor's school to pick her up and she is not there. And I'm like, where are you? So first of all, they have like no service in the school zone. So I'm like texting and when it's like text doesn't go through and it's like, why is this not working? And then I call her in the middle of basketball practice. I'm like, Elle, where are you? She's like, I'm sorry. I was wrong about the time for pickup. So I'm like, I just need to breathe through this moment and not kill my child. But in my head, I'm like, and I was interviewing with a woman who is a mom. And I was like, do I cancel on her and tell her it's because I was with my kids? Is this indicative that I won't be able to show up because I'm a mom? Does this mean that I'm like, what does this say about me? I planned poorly. I'm like distracted by my kids, etc. And I was like, F it. If I can't be honest with this woman, then that's on me. And if I am honest and they don't hire me because of it, that's on them, you know?
What you said resonated so hard between coming from a family where parents were working a ton and COVID made this incredible blend, which I know is a huge privilege, of being able to be with my parents a lot more and flow through that coming out of COVID. But I do think that it would be incredible to have another episode talking through some of your career changes and where there was times where there might have been a value misalignment or something, like now in this very retrospective stage to say like, oh, maybe that wasn't serving me best. And this is what I would have done differently. And I feel like we could unpack so much there. So I would love to do another episode and break those things down. But we typically wrap with a handful of kind of quick questions. So these are supposed to be one word, a couple words off the cuff. And I wanted to rattle those off. So
let's do it.
What is something that you can't live without?
It's a tie between my children and Swedish fish.
All very important. What is something that keeps you feeling grounded?
Also my children.
And Swedish fish. Do you admire most and why?
My mom, because she manages to be kind and strong and shows up and is just, she never forgets anything. She would remember your birthday if you told her once. And she's like that.
That is so incredible. That's such an inspiration too of someone to look up to in motherhood. What makes you feel very wealthy?
Feel the most wealthy when I'm just staying where my sneakers are. So when I take a minute and I'm like, this is where I am right now, I have everything I need. That's when it works.
Oh, that gives me chills. What is something that very few people know about you?
What is something that very few people know about me? I mean, that I'm not a real blonde, that I'm from New Jersey.
I'm not a real blonde, and it's officially just I'm brunette now. I noticed on this comment.
So good. I love that one.
That is awesome. Well, Melissa, thank you so much for carving out the time, especially at this time of the year. This has been so cup filling. I can't wait to go back through, and we will definitely have to do a part 2 when your time permits. And just so followers know, where is best to connect with you? Are you posting on social media, LinkedIn? Where is your...
I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram. And I also just want to say thank you to both of you for the example you set, the way you invest in women. It's just this whole dialogue is really important, and I'm grateful to be part of it.
We're grateful for you.
Chat soon.
See you on the next one.
Bye.